In this video, we are going to talk about top 10 horror games. So before starting this video, please like this video and subscribe to this channel for our future updates. The best horror games aren't just about blood and loud noises to make you jump. I mean, that can be a big part, but a good horror game knows that letting you scare yourself is better than any monster jumping through the window. This list of the best horror games you can play right now encompasses a broad range of terror from more contemplative slow burners to full-on monster-filled splatter fests. There's something to fit every mood, so decide whether you want to be creeped out, terrified, disgusted, or just experience the worst horror has to offer Mild Peril. Whatever you're after, we've got something for you in our list of best horror games, and certainly enough to keep you busy until the rumored Silent Hill PS5 reboot arrives. If that ever happens, it'll almost certainly earn a place on this list, but where? Better get playing so you've got some reference. Here are the top 10 horror games. Before we begin, why don't you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so that you never miss any of our videos. Let's begin. Number 10. Amnesia: Rebirth. Building on the themes of memory loss, pursuing monsters and otherworldly magics, Amnesia: Rebirth builds on the previous games in the series to deliver a tense, playable slice of horror fiction. There's almost a literary feel to the game as you explore the darkness as Tassie, a French explorer lost in the desert. Familiar mechanics like failing sanity, eroded by the dark, or looking at monsters, returns, but this time contained within a much more coherent and enticing story. There are some great puzzles, horrible monsters, but it's that narrative that binds it all together. Tassie goes on a journey and there's a strong draw to following her to see where it all goes and what it means. Whether you're a fan of the Amnesia franchise or not, there's a real page-turning, must-see-what-happens feel to the adventure. The monster encounters can be horrific and stressful, but it's the space between where the story expands and twists and turns that really sells it. Number 9. Dead Space. If Resident Evil is the king of survival action horror, then Dead Space aimed to be the pretender to the throne, bringing together Capcom's early Dread and latter-day over-the-shoulder shooting into one gory package. Borrowing from Alien and other sci-fi classics, the 2008 release put players in the role of Isaac Clarke, an engineer trapped on a derelict spacecraft. Soon Isaac finds out the ship isn't as empty as it seems, as a strange alien artifact has transformed everyone on board into hideous, flesh-eating creatures, each more horrific than the last. Dead Space crafts a horrifying experience by limiting the player. Isaac is short on ammo, he rarely knows what's going on in the continually shifting story, and he's most in danger of what he can't see. So much of the disturbing atmosphere is built on what you hear, and the amazing sound design uses audio to fashion an entire deadly world around Isaac. Though the sequel pulled back on the scares somewhat in favor of cinematic action, the original remains trapped in our nightmares. Number 8. Soma. Soma has problems, largely from clumsy stealth section, but it also has, hands down, one of the most unpleasantly disturbing stories of anything in this list. To explain why would ruin it, but this plays with ideas of consciousness and what makes you in a terrifying way. When you're not exploring the rusting, decrepit undersea base of Pathos 2, you're playing with some pretty heavy metaphysic concepts fit to give you nightmares. This is a world filled with broken machines full of glitching human consciousnesses and slimy growths that expands and grows into something terrible the longer you spend exploring. The undersea and biotech elements make a BioShock comparison hard to avoid, but while there are similarities, man's hubris and science pushed too far, especially, this is far more unpleasant and ethically shocking. The new, safe mode means you can also now play it just for the story, finish it and see if you can sleep after. Number 7. Outlast. Outlast offers a first-person trek through a setting literally no one in real life would willingly check out, an old asylum that seems abandoned, but also strangely very active. At night. In the mountains. Miles from help. Who does that? The setup alone is perfect horror fodder, but this plays out like found footage, the game, via clever use of a video camera's night vision mode to see in the dark. The grainy, glowing green view it creates gets a little too close to real life as well. It's one part exploring to two parts follow shadowy, wheezing shapes in the black distance through a viewfinder while cowering behind a table. Scary enough already, the perfection of its pixelated whirring focus pulls only adds to the atmosphere. It's a great game to play with company as well because you'll both be screaming at some point. Number 6. Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill, as a franchise, is home to some of the most frightening enemies and situations in gaming history, but the series' most abiding horror is Silent Hill 2. This PS2 classic manifests our deepest fears as flesh, to reveal there is no greater evil than our own imagination. Though he'll encounter creatures like the iconic nurses and Pyramid Head, protagonist James Sunderland is far more threatened by his personal demons. And the empty town of Silent Hill brings them all to the surface. James has returned to Silent Hill answering a letter that seems to come from his dead wife, but all he finds are reminders of his own anguish and guilt over her death. Every corner of the town is inhabited by some new horror, but James has to push past his fears if he ever wants to know what's going on. And he will not like what he finds beyond them. Silent Hill 2 doesn't just present you with a horror game worth playing, but a story worth being listened to, parsed, and gawping awfully about. The deeper you go, the worse it gets. Number 5. Resident Evil 2 Remake. It seems almost unimaginable that over 20 years after its original PS1 release the classic Resident Evil 2 is back on the best horror games list. But then we are talking about Resident Evil 2 Remake, a from-the-ground remake of the original game that honors the past while building a future for the franchise with a game nearly 2 decades old. It's a success, and high on this list, because of how it melds old and new so perfectly. It's a perfect retelling of Leon and Claire's original attempts to escape a zombie-filled Raccoon City, with all the monsters, set pieces and story beats you remember. But it's also built with today's horror sensibilities, merging an almost beautiful level of indulgent gore with tight gunplay, clever puzzles and some beautiful levels. This is as essential now as the original game was back in the day. Number 4. PT. If you brought together the world's most idiosyncratic game auteur and one of its greatest film monster creators and they didn't make one of the oddest, most horrible games yet released, you'd be pretty upset. Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro's playable teaser for the now-canned Silent Hills places you in a single, infinitely looping hallway, and proceeds to find 1,000 ways to terrify you. This is no idle boast. One member of the game's Radar Plus team was unable to play this game with the lights off, and was forced to turn the sound down to make it tolerable. There are moments where you face peril, but they're few and far between. The real terror comes from the unknown. What could be around the next bend? A fresh nightmare or nothing at all? Your imagination fills in the blanks, creating more terror than any simple jump scare or creepy noise could. Add in an underlying tale of domestic terror that would make any Silent Hill fan nostalgic, and you've got the world's shortest masterpiece of horror in your shaking hands. Number 3. Alien: Isolation. Countless games have been inspired by elements of the Alien franchise, be it James Cameron's Space Marines, Ellen Ripley's Fortitude, or the chilling power of silence in a soundtrack. Despite all that, Alien: Isolation may be the series' greatest gaming triumph. It takes the gut-wrenching fear fostered by the lone xenomorph in the original film, and extends it into a lengthy game. Isolation's tense survival gameplay keeps the pulse pounding for hours and hours. Number 2. Layers of Fear. Most games can make you jump, they can make scream, but few can make you doubt yourself in real life. Layers of Fear initially appears very familiar as you explore a spooky, creepy and cavernously empty house. The gothic story unravels slowly as you play an unnamed artist returning home. It soon becomes clear though that madness has overtaken the painter, and it expresses itself in the unreliable narration of the physical world. Doors disappear and corridors warp out of shape just in the corner of you. The game rearranges itself in such a way to recreate the main character's madness that only a few hours in and you'll find yourself questioning everything. Was that desk on that side of the room last time you looked? Are you sure? Add to that the nature of the protagonist's illness, an obsessional painting made from less than savory materials, and you have one of the greatest horror games of all time. Number 1. Resident Evil 7. It could have been a disaster, a clunky, forced update to a revered series that left fans clamoring for the bombastic nonsense of Resident Evil 6. But Resident 7 is a triumph, smartly feeding off the best horror movies of the last 20 years, effortlessly easing all that edgy new into a recognizable, modern reinvention of the series. The central story is fantastic, the mysteries artfully concealed, and your tormentors, the Bakers, are brilliantly subversive. Switching the action to first person adds some VR possibilities, but also makes the horror feel uncomfortably close. Grueling, compelling stuff, in a setting you'll remember long after exploring it up close. But perhaps the cleverest trick is just how Resident it all feels. What do you think of our list? Which of the game you have played? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications before you go. Thanks for watching.